"10-4. I can do that, sir. Over." "Oh, hello. My boss has informed me that I am to give you a super secret insider closed information, and that you are supposed to be told some fantasy books that have murder mystery subplots in them. Welcome to your recommendation list." Now, this list, although I call it a recommendation list, does have things on it that I have not all loved. It is a list of books I know that have a murder mystery subplot into them that are fantasy. It doesn't necessarily mean I loved it. I will give you my rating or my enjoyment of a book and explain to you what the book's about, and then you can make your own decision, because just because I didn't like a book doesn't mean you won't. Most of these are good. So, let's just roll right on into it and get you some insider information. The first one is easily my favorite on this list, which is The Swordsmans Lament by G.M. White. This is an indie novella. It is part of a series. It is book one of the series, although this book wraps up perfectly. I think it stands as a standalone itself, and it's beautiful. I gave this book a very high 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. You're not getting much out of this book other than what you are being sold. You are getting a murder mystery that happens in a medieval time. Now, the fantasy in this book is really light, if not non-existent. Honestly, it's non-existent. The fantasy of this is the made-up world that we're in. What happens is we are following our king's champion, whose only duty is to defend the king and the kingdom and all of that. When someone sneaks in and murders the prince, the king's champion is accused. And we have to follow him, figure out who actually did it, because obviously it wasn't him, and learn the little intrigues of the court, and kind of just learn some politics and learn some of the past background of our king's champion. Now, there is a prequel novella, The Swordsman's Intent, that does not follow a murder mystery. I have not read this, and I actually do recommend, from people I've heard, starting with this and maybe reading the novella afterwards. This just gives you more backstory on our king's champion, but I really enjoyed this murder mystery. Yes, it's predictable, but it's everything I wanted. It's a light, easy read, just over 200, I think it's like 210 pages, quick, easy, and it's just a fun time, and our characters in it really remind me of the Greatcoats. So, Traitors played by Sebastian de Castell, they just kind of hold themselves that way, and I feel like he belongs as one of them, and there's a little bit of slight humor as you go, and I really, really enjoyed this one. Another one is the second book in the Mirror Visitor Quartet. This is the first one. Let me pop the second book up on the screen for you, which is The Missing of Claire de Lune. Obviously, you do have to read the first book to get to this one, but I highly suggest doing it because the second one is incredible, and it is my favorite book of the series. I think that book itself makes the series worth reading. I can't really tell you much about what the murder mystery in this one is, because you do have to read A Winter's Promise, but it's great and it's hilarious. There's lots of fun. I think that there's just like a lot of fun in this book, but let me explain what the Mirror Visitor is about so you can make up your mind of whether you want to start the series. The Mirror Visitor Quartet follows Ophelia, who lives on an ark. So in this world, our world has like dispersed into different arcs. Each arc has its own family spirit, and each family spirit passes down magical powers to its descendants on the ark. So Ophelia lives in our one ark, who I never remember the name of, and she has the power to like touch and read things. So when she touches something, she can kind of like read anything that's ever happened to it, or like whoever's like touched it, and like kind of like see the history. She also can travel through mirrors. Ophelia is set in an arranged marriage to Thorn, who comes from the pole arc. Most of the story happens in the pole, and the pole is the coolest setting. It is like a polar fantasy, and there's a lot of different politics and a lot of different things happening in the pole. The pole is very different to her arc, and she kind of has to learn how to fit in, and there are greater things happening. And she actually, it's another trope I really like, is she is disguising herself as a man in this one because people can't know who she is when she comes to the pole. So this whole time she disguises as a man servant and kind of just gets to hear all the gossip and everything that's happening within the pole, which leads us to The Missing of Claire de Lune, where someone goes missing in Claire de Lune. It's great. It's great. I really enjoyed this series up until the last book, but I still highly recommend reading it. I think that it has lovable characters, it's fun, it's quirky, there's an arranged marriage. I rooted for them the entire time. I'm slightly spoiling my vlog that comes out on Saturday for this one, but City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett has a murder mystery, and I really enjoyed this one. In this one, we're in a world where there used to be deities, there used to be gods, but a human killed off the gods, and in the blink of an eye, anything that was held or touched by a god broke or disappeared or whatever. And now on these continents where there were gods, it is now illegal to talk about the gods, to do anything about the gods. But we follow a protagonist who works as like a cultural ambassador, and she actually goes around and kind of makes anything disappear that has to do with the gods, because people aren't supposed to know that they're still leftovers of the gods. Essentially, they're supposed to believe that they never existed and that they're never coming back, and can't talk about them, can't do anything with them. And so our protagonist just like goes around and makes things disappear and covers things up, and she ends up going to the city where the gods used to be like the most prominent, because one of her coworkers was murdered and she has to figure out who done it. And it was a really great time. I really enjoyed this one. Stay tuned for the vlog on Saturday where I read it and I give you all of my thoughts. And then we have Every Hearted Doorway by Seanan McGuire. Now, I gave this book 2 stars, but I continued the series, and I have given the series anywhere from 2 in this book to 4 stars, and I do enjoy some of this series, which is the Wayward Children series. Every Hearted Doorway is really the only one I think that follows a murder mystery, and I know a lot of people who absolutely adore this series, and I think that there is probably a book for anyone if they want to read this series. It is middle grade for adult, so it's actually written for adults, but it reads quite similar to middle grade. It's very whimsy, it's very hopeful. In this series, we're following the Wayward Children's House, which is, we follow these kids who go through doors to, like, their perfect world. This is the world where they're always going to feel like they're going to belong. They go to this world, and then at some point, something happens, and they get kicked out. And so they have to go back to Earth, and all this time has passed, and they don't know what to do, because they left the place that felt like home to them. So they go to the Wayward Children's House, where they have to learn how to kind of deal with it, and now hopefully live here until maybe one day they are allowed back. And in this one, we are just following a murder mystery because someone killed someone at the school, and we have to figure out who did it. Yeah, so read this one, especially if you like a whimsy fantasy, or you just want like these are really easy to read. You can read this one. And then we have A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. I think I gave this book 2 stars. This is a fae story, so we actually are in Toronto, Canada, which is something I really hated about the book. It's an urban fantasy, and we have the 2 fae realms. We have the Seelie Court and the Unseelie Court, and we have a character who has to, like, prove herself to fit in because she is half fae, half human, and you have to, like, have your magic develop before a certain age, or you get, like, your memory wiped if you're a human, or if you're, like, half human. And there's a bunch of murders happening that are affecting the Fae Kingdom, and you kind of have to learn why. Now, I have a bunch of negatives about this book, but we're not going to talk about them because I'm here to sell this book on you. If you like a fae story, if you like an urban fantasy story, if you like a queer story, there are 4 characters in this, and all 4 are queer, I would pick this one up. This one has a cool magic. I do think the magic is cool. Nausicaa, I loved Nausicaa, but I didn't attach myself to any of the other characters, but I think I am an odd one out in this one, and I do think that this story has potential. I do know at one point I was thinking about picking up book 2, but I just have too many books to read, so I'm not picking up book 2 anymore, but I did enjoy it enough that I was interested in maybe picking up book 2. And yeah, this is a debut, and I do think the writing will get better from here, and there is a murder mystery in this, and it's a very complex murder mystery, and a lot of stuff happens, and I know when we find out who the villain is, there's like a villain monologue, and I really thought the villain was actually quite interesting. You actually do get POVs from a darker character in this, and what happened to Nausicaa and why Nausicaa is around is really cool. And yeah, this is Nausicaa, by the way. She's badass. Try this one out. One I can't really sell you on because I DNF'd it, but so many people loved it, is The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. Now, this one we are following the Emperor's Justice as he has to figure out what's going on, and there's like a conspiracy happening, but he's really focused on the murder mystery. The thing is, we don't actually follow from his POV. We follow his, like, associate's POV, who is a younger female, and you just kind of hear his story through her, which is not what I wanted, but just be prepared going into it, and maybe you will like it. I know so many people who like this one. There is a courtroom scene in this one. I have been told, and I did not get far enough into this to really give you valid opinions or anything. I'm just holding up here because I do know there's a murder mystery subplot in this, and it is like a medieval fantasy. And then we have Ashes of the Sun. There is a small murder mystery plot in this. It's not very huge. It takes up probably 20% of this book, so I probably shouldn't be on this list, but I needed another reason to shout from the skies of why people should read this. Gave this book 4 stars. I'm absolutely adoring this series. It's a little bit fantasy, a little bit sci-fi, a little bit horror. It's incredible. The magic system is based on Star Wars and is super, super cool. I actually have a video on my channel about why you should read this book, where I go into like lots of details and why it's so great. You should definitely check that one out, linked in the description bar below. And in this, we are following 2 siblings, a sister who was taken by the Empire and now works for the Empire, and a brother who now wants to take the Empire down and works for the Rebellion. And you just see their struggles, and they go on really cool arcs, but we do have a small murder mystery in this, so it's on this list. But if you need an excuse to pick this up, you can tell the world that it was on Cassie's murder mystery list and pick it up. That's all I'm going to say about this, because I've been shouting from the rooftops about this book so many times. It's so good. It's well written. A little bit sci-fi, but lots of fantasy, and there's like ghouls and chosen ones, and it's really good. I think that's all I got for you. So, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and make sure to keep this video under wraps because Division might get angry at me for spilling our Division secrets. And if you'd like to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon, all linked in the description bar below. Have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day. Okay, boss, I'm done. Can I go on break now?